The knock on the cabin door, the wind screamed across the high cliffs of Orion 4. Night fell fast in these parts, thick, cold, and unforgiving. Snow drifted in strange patterns outside the old research outpost, long abandoned by the corporations that built it. Only one man remained. His name was Leaf. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't a scientist, just a quiet human who stayed behind when everyone else left. He had a cabin at the edge of the crater basin, lit by old solar panels and kept warm by a rusting fusion heater. He lived simply, alone, by choice, that night. The knock came just as the storm hit. 3 slow, weak taps, barely audible. Leaf frowned. No one should have been out there. He opened the door and his heart skipped. A woman stood there, not human. Her skin was a deep silvery blue, marked with old scars. She held something in her arms. A child, also alien thin, shivering, wrapped in torn fabric. Behind her, the wind howled louder, like it wanted to swallow her whole. She looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "If I warm your bed," she said in broken standard, "will you let us stay?" Leaf blinked, then stepped aside without a word. She hesitated. Her body trembled not from the cold, but from fear. She entered slowly, holding the child tightly. Leaf closed the door, sealed it against the wind. "You're not warming anyone's bed," he said gently, offering her a blanket instead. "You're warming by the heater, both of you." She looked confused, suspicious, but exhaustion won. He helped them sit, gave them food. Not much, just some rehydrated stew and clean water. The child clung to her, eyes big for its face, afraid of every sound. "What's your name?" Leaf asked. The woman's lips trembled. "Sari." And the child? "Malik." Leaf nodded. "You're safe here." She stared at him like she didn't understand the word. She didn't speak again for a long time. But Leaf didn't push her. He just sat nearby, fixing an old scanner core with quiet hands. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, something gentler stirred. Later that night, while Malik slept beside the heater, Sari sat quietly at the edge of the cot, watching Leaf. "No man has ever said no before," she whispered. Leaf glanced at her. "I don't take from people who are cold and afraid." She lowered her eyes. "But I have nothing else." He shook his head. "You have your child, your courage, and the strength to walk through a storm." "That's not nothing." Sari blinked, fast, as if fighting tears. "Alien or not," the expression was the same. "They hunted us," she said softly. "The ones who used to own us. Malik's father. He died protecting us." Leaf looked at her. Something in his face changed, but he didn't speak, just handed her a second blanket. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next." And though the night outside was bitter and endless, the cabin felt warm. But unknown to any of them, a signal had been triggered when Sari crossed the old perimeter. Something was watching, something that didn't care for kindness. And Leaf, the man everyone had forgotten, was not as simple as he seemed. She dreamed of fire, but woke to warm. Sari didn't sleep much that night. Her body ached from days of walking, hiding, running through the harsh rocks of Orion 4. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fire, the raiders, the smoldering shelter, Malik crying for his father who would never come back. But in the cabin, there was no screaming, no footsteps pounding after her, just the soft hum of the fusion heater and the rhythmic clicking of life's old tools. He had stayed up late, fixing a broken sensor array with quiet patience, as if it helped him think. Malik slept beside her, his small body curled under the thick blanket, his breathing steady. Sari watched his chest rise and fall. Each breath was a gift she hadn't expected to keep. As morning broke, light filtered through the frost-covered window, casting soft shadows across the cabin walls. Sari sat up slowly, careful not to wake her son. Her eyes drifted to Leaf, who was still at the table, head resting on his folded arms. He had fallen asleep with the tools in his hands. She stood quietly, walking toward the heater to warm her fingers. When Leaf stirred and opened his eyes, he looked at her without surprise. "You didn't sleep either," he said. She shrugged. "I haven't slept truly in a long time." He poured her a cup of warm nutrient tea and pushed it across the table. She accepted it with both hands. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the tea?" he asked. "For not making me feel like a price tag." Leaf didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them was full but peaceful. Then, suddenly, the cabin's warning light flickered. A sharp beep followed. Leaf rose quickly, motion tripline. West Quadrant. Sari stood, alarmed. They found us. Not sure. Could be a scavenger drone. He said, but I need to check it. He strapped on his old jacket and grabbed a pulse beacon. Stay inside. Don't open the door. But Sari followed him to the threshold. If it's them, you won't come back. Leaf looked at hurriedly looked and saw the fear behind her strong front. I've survived worse, he said, calmly, and I'm not leaving you alone out here. He stepped outside. The wind had softened overnight, but the air still bit hard against the skin. Leaf moved through the snow-covered path with trained steps. Sari watched from the window, holding Malik close, her thoughts racing. This human, he wasn't just kind. He was prepared, and that made her wonder. What had he done before this quiet life? Who had he been? Leaf reached the tripline sensor buried in the rocks. Snow covered the small blinking module, but someone had triggered it. Fresh tracks. Not animal. He followed them slowly. Reaching a ridge and froze. A sleek black drone hovered just above the rocks, scanning the landscape. Not a scavenger. Not corporate. VO or Rantech. Leaf single quotes as hand tightened around the pulse beacon. But he didn't activate it yet. Instead, he crouched and watched. If this drone was scouting, others would follow. When he returned to the cabin, Sari stood in the doorway, her face pale. They're coming, aren't they? Leaf nodded. Not yet, but soon. What do we do? Leaf paused, then walked to a hidden compartment beneath the cabin floor. He unlocked it. Inside were old weapons, survival gear, signal, jammers. Things a quiet recluse should not have. HRI stared. Who are you really? He looked at her and said quietly, someone who used to protect people, and someone who still will. She stood still, stunned. And in that moment, Sari realized this was no simple man living in the snow. Leaf had secrets. And whatever they were, they just might save her son. Asterisk. His past wasn't buried. It was waiting. Silence in the cabin was different now. Not peaceful. Charged. HRI stood near the hidden compartment Leaf had opened, her eyes scanning the rows of old gear, blasters, frequency disruptors, pulse. Net traps all clean, maintained, organized like someone who never stopped being ready. Malik stirred behind her, still half asleep. You were military, she said softly. Leaf didn't deny it. He sat on the edge of a crate, his hands wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. His eyes were distant, watching something only he could see. Not anymore, he said. But the past doesn't always stay buried. Sari lowered her voice. Why did you stay behind on this planet? Everyone else left. Leaf looked at her. For a long time, because I broke an order that shouldn't have been given, and I couldn't watch what they were doing anymore. To people like me, she asked. He nodded once. Yeah. The words settled between them like stones dropped in deep water. HRI sat beside him, carefully. So what happens now? Now, he said, we make sure they don't take your boy, or you. Malik crawled into her lap, half awake, small, fingers gripping her tunic. She kissed the top of his head and held him tighter. Leaf opened the second crate and pulled out a small, sleek device. He handed it to Sari. Wear this on your wrist. If they breach the valley, hit the blue trigger. It'll activate the jammer net, shuts down small drones and scrambles scanners. She looked at it with surprise. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're not weak, he said. And you need to be ready to protect your son if I'm not standing between you and the danger. Sari felt her throat tighten. No one had ever trusted her to fight, only to offer, to surrender, to survive. Now, a man she barely knew was handing her a weapon not to use for him, but for herself. They spent the rest of the morning reinforcing the cabin's defenses. Leaf reprogrammed the outer perimeter and buried motion sensors along the east slope. Sari practiced using the jammer device, and for the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't safety. Not yet. But it was the shape of it. The wind shifted in the afternoon, bringing with it the sound of engines, distant, but growing. Sari's ears twitched. They're close, she said. Leaf stepped outside with a scanner scope, then cursed under his breath. 3 drop skiffs, armed, boring code markings. He turned to Sari. They're not here to ask questions. Malik clung to her leg, wide-eyed. We'll hide in the valley, Sari said quickly. There's a cave. I saw it on the way here. No, Leaf interrupted. They'll sweep it first. She looked desperate. Then what do we do? He stared at the child for a moment, then back at her. We stay. We hold the line. If they're looking for you, then this is where they'll look, and this is where. They'll stop. Sari swallowed. You're willing to die for us? Life's voice was steady. Not die. Fight. And make sure they understand. Humans protect what matters. Even if it's not their own blood. A flash of memory flickered. In Sari's mind, her mate falling in the dust, shielding Malik. She blinked hard. Then I'll fight too. She whispered. For him, and for whatever this is. They sealed the cabin, prepared the traps, activated the net, and as the engines roared closer, Sari stood beside Leaf, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as someone ready to stand her ground. Asterisk, they didn't come to talk. They came to take. His sun had already dipped behind the jagged cliffs. When the first ship came into view, sleek, black, low-flying, its engines whispered like snakes through the valley air. Two more followed, slowing to a hover above the ridge across from the cabin. Leaf and Sari crouched low behind the reinforced window. Malik slept in a hidden nook beneath the floor, wrapped in warm cloth, breathing slow and steady. They're scanning, Leaf said quietly, watching his old tactical pad. Thermal, motion, and probably biosignature sweep. Sari tapped the jammer on her wrist. Will it be enough for the first few minutes? Maybe less. Outside, 3 figures dropped from the ships. All wore Voran hunter suits, gray and red armor, faces hidden behind cold visors. They moved with mechanical precision. One of them knelt and touched the snow, scanning. They'll circle before breaching, Leaf said. We have one chance to warn them off. After that, a sharp knock cut him off. It was at the front door. Saw HRI single quotes S breath caught. A voice echoed from a small drone speaker just outside. Turn over the fugitives. This does not concern the human. You may leave unharmed. Leaf raised an eyebrow. How generous of them. He stepped to the door and keyed the speaker. They're not fugitives, he said flatly. They're under my protection. Pause. Final warning. You interfere. You become an enemy of the Voran claim. Leaf exhaled, then smiled slightly. Guess I'm your enemy. Then, he stepped back and activated the first trap, a pulse mine. Beneath, the snow exploded in a burst of light, disabling the nearest soldier's armor. The second tried to fire, but Sari, standing at the side window, hit her jammer. His weapon jammed. Sparks flew. The third raised a signal device, but Leaf shot it clean from his hand with a sharp, calculated pulse blast. That's your warning, Leaf shouted. Next time, it won't be traps. It'll be war. But the Voran didn't run. Instead, the central one removed his helmet, revealing a pale, gray-skinned face with black eyes. Smooth, expressionless. He looked up at the cabin. You should not have gotten involved, human. Leaf stared right back. You picked the wrong child to chase. The Voran leader raised his hand and a new sound filled the valley. From behind the ships, the larger forms emerged. Not men, not machines. Enforcers. Hybrid drones. Half organic. Massive. Tall as the cabin roof. Saw HRI single quotes as blood went cold. Those things will tear the walls apart. She whispered. Then we hold the inside. Leaf said, and we protect Malik, no matter what. He handed Sari a smaller pulse pistol. She stared at it. Her hands shook, but she didn't say no. She nodded. Double quotes. I won't let them take him again. The cabin walls trembled as the enforcers began their slow advance. Outside, snow blew in wild gusts. Metal boots slammed against stone. Inside, to people, one human, one not stood back to back. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. Asterisk. Her hands shook, but her aim was truth. Cabin groaned. As the first enforcer slammed against the front wall. Inside, the lights flickered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Sari gripped the small pulse pistol tight, her breathing shallow. Leaf crouched beside the front door, setting the last of the proximity charges. Every movement was sharp, practiced. His calm made the chaos feel survivable. They're testing the walls first. Leaf muttered. Next hit, they'll breach. Sari looked toward the floorboards beneath the table, where Malik slept in a hidden nook. The boy hadn't woken. Not yet. She prayed he would in single quotes. Outside, metal feet scraped across the snow. A loud mechanical screech filled the valley. Then silence. Then came the blast. The enforcers ripped through the front wall, shattering the entryway in a single blow. Snow and smoke poured in. Sari staggered back, coughing. To red eyes glowed in the haze. Leaf fired first. 3 pulse blasts hit the lead enforcer in the chest. Sparks flew, but it kept coming. Fall back, he shouted, tossing a shock grenade. They ducked behind the supply crates as the grenade detonated. The enforcer jerked, overloaded for a second. That second was enough. Saw her eye rose from behind cover and aimed. Her finger trembled on the trigger. Don't miss. Not now. Not with Malik here. She fired. The bolt struck the enforcer's exposed neck joint. The creature lurched hand collapsed in a heap of steam and broken wires. Leaf turned, blinking. Nice shot. She didn't smile. Her hand was still shaking. There's another, she said. He nodded. Back window. The second enforcer came crashing through the side, sweeping its blade arm toward the ceiling. Sari grabbed Malik from the floor just in time, shielding his body with hers as debris fell around them. Leaf charged. His boot slammed into the enforcer's knee joint, knocking it sideways. He fired point blank into its exposed circuits. The blast lit the room in white. Then silence. Just the sound of labored breathing and crackling wires. Malik whimpered. I held him tight. It's over, she whispered, kissing his forehead. You're safe. We're safe. But Leaf wasn't smiling. He stood near the wrecked entryway, staring at a blinking red beacon on the enforcer's chest. They didn't come to capture, he said. They came to marked us, the cabin, the whole area. It's a locator beacon. Within the hour, they'll send a full strike team. Sari's eyes widened. We can't stay. No, and we can't outrun them either. She held Malik close. Then what do we do? Leaf knelt and pulled out a worn data core from the back of the enforcer. We don't run, he said. We give them something else to chase. He placed the core into a portable transmitter, one old enough to fake ship signals. He keyed in new coordinates. There's an old mining settlement 50 clicks east. Abandoned. We send the beacon there. Make it look like we escaped in a crawler. A decoy, Sari said, catching on. He nodded. Then we head west. Into the high cliffs. Hard to scan, easy to hide. Sari looked at the open door. Snow already covered the footprints of the dead. She felt something stir in her chest. Not fear. Something harder. Something stronger. Let's go, she said. They left the cabin behind. It had protected them, saved them. Now it would burn to cover their tracks. As they climbed into the wilds, Sari looked at Leaf. You didn't have to fight, she said. He glanced at her. Neither did you. She smiled faintly. But we did. Beneath the stars, with Malik asleep in her arms and fire at their backs, she whispered to herself, we're not just running anymore. We're becoming something new. Asterisk, they found sanctuary, but the past followed. Cliffs rose like broken teeth from the earth, sharp and ancient. Leaf guided Sari and Malik through narrow paths hidden beneath overhangs, their footsteps swallowed by snow and silence. Above, the sky cracked with faint lightning storm clouds gathering. They reached an old relay station near dusk. It was half buried in rock. Its door rusted shut until Leaf powered it open with a pulse override. Inside, it was cold, dry, and empty. Perfect. This used to boost signal to the outer research zones, Leaf said, sweeping dust off a metal bench. No one's used it in years. Sari tucked Malik into a cot made of old blankets and insulation foam. His body curled against her. He hadn't spoken much since the attack. Not in fear, he just seemed tired of running. He needs time, she whispered. You all do, Leaf replied. But time was the one thing they didn't have much of. Leaf sat by the console, rerouting old power lines to set up scanners. Sari warmed a nutrient bar near her. He coiled, watching him closely. You move like a soldier, she said. He answered. You think like a protector. I try. Then she asked the question she'd been holding since the cabin burned. Why us? Leaf didn't turn, because no one else did. But you don't know me. He finally looked at her. I don't need to. I saw enough. The moment you stepped through my door and offered your dignity just for shelter, I knew someone had failed you, and I wasn't going to be the next one. Sari looked down, swallowing hard. No one had ever said it like that before she could speak. A soft beep echoed through the chamber. Leaf turned to the console. His face darkened. They found the decoy. Sari's chest tightened. How? Soon before they realize. They already have. They're shifting west. They'll be scanning these cliffs within hours. Malik stirred. Sari knelt beside him, whispering soft reassurances in her native tongue. Life's hands flew over the controls. We can't keep running. We don't have a choice. He paused, then slowly turned to her. What if we don't run? She frowned. You mean, fight? No. He said, we broadcast. Sari blinked. Broadcast what? The truth. He pointed to the enforcer's data core. This is logs, tracking records, comms between Voran commanders, proof of slave captures, extermination orders, including Malik's location tag. They were going to take him, Sari said softly, staring at the console. And now we can show the galaxy they did it. To you, to thousands of others. Sari's breath hitched. But who would listen? Someone will, he said. Maybe not all, but someone. She walked over and slowly placed her hand on the console. Then let's do it. Leaf nodded. They prepared the broadcast, patching the core into a signal array. Sari recorded a message short, quiet, clear. My name is Sari. I was taken. My mate was killed. My child was marked. I am no one, but I matter, and so does every life they tried to erase. They launched the message on for old relay bands. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and slow. They didn't speak much after that. Not out of fear, but because something had changed for the first time. They weren't just running from the past. They were turning to face it. They came to silence her, but the stars heard first. Snowstorm fell harder the next morning. Wind screamed through the mountain cracks, but the relay station stood firm. Leaf checked the scanners again. The Voran signal was near, less than an hour away. Sari stood by the cot, arms wrapped around Malik, who still hadn't spoken. The broadcast had gone out. That part was done, but whether it reached anyone, no one knew. We should move, she said quietly, before they land. Leaf didn't answer at first. He stared out through the frost-streaked window. We can't outrun them this time. Then we fight. No, he said. We hold, not to survive, but to prove we didn't break. She stepped beside him. Her voice shook. They'll kill us, maybe, he said, but not before they hear our names. Far above, a ship appeared. Then another, and another. 3 in total, descending in silence dark against the pale sky. The ground trembled as they landed on the plateau below. Leaf activated the last of the signal flares and placed Malik in a protective hatch beneath the console. Whatever happens, he whispered to the boy, you're the reason we stood our ground. Malik nodded once. And for the first time in days, he whispered back, don't let them hurt her. Sari froze at the sound. Her eyes filled. I won't, Leaf said. The door shook with the first strike. A deep voice echoed from outside. Exit the station. This is your final warning. Sari looked at Leaf. No more running, she said. No more silence. He agreed. They stood side by side as the door burst open. VOA ran. Troops flooded in, weapons raised. Leaf held his hands up. Empty. Sci-Fi stepped forward. You've already lost, she said. The commander approached, sneering. You think your little signal means anything? But before he could finish, static burst from his calm. A voice came through, human, strong, commanding. This is Admiral Lita of the Independent Systems. We received the transmission. We stand with Sari. The Voran paused. Another calm crackle. This is the Empress of Lunari Prime. The message reached our people. The child is under our protection now. One by one, voices came from the outer rim. From neutral colonies. From humans. From aliens. Not an army, but a storm of truth. It hit harder than any weapon. The Voran lowered their guns. The commander stared at Sari like she was something new, something he didn't understand. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, Sari said, stepping closer. It is. The troops pulled back. Their ships rose into the snow-filled sky and vanished. Leaf leaned against the wall, exhausted. Sci-Fi stood in the center of the room, her hands shaking. Not from fear. From release. Malik crawled out of the hatch and ran to her. She fell to her knees, holding him tight. We're free, he asked softly. She nodded. Yes, little one, we're free. Leaf sat beside them. He looked at Sari with quiet respect. You changed the stars, he said. No, she whispered. We did. In the days that followed, relief ships arrived. Word spread fast. Sari's message sparked something across the system's truth. Unity, resistance. Not war, not vengeance. Hope. They gave Leaf a medal. He gave it to Malik. And when Sari was offered a new home on a peaceful moon, she asked just one thing. Can he come too? She said, pointing to Leaf. Leaf raised an eyebrow. Why me? Sari smiled softly. Because you're the first one who saw me as more than useful. And so, the quiet human who once lived alone in the snow followed the alien mother and her son into a new life. Where kindness meant strength, and where no one had to offer their body just to be allowed to stay.